not so far away. I give the floor without further ado to Guillaume Néry.
Bonjour.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me? Good afternoon. And thank you for receiving me here for this brief presentation in the course of this meeting, Science, Art and Meditation. We're going to leave the surface and I'm going to take you into the ocean depths. And aside from the images you will see, where you think that this is only a sporting exploit, but there's so many things that are happening in the body and the mind. These are all the phases during diving that I would like to share with you. And I hope you can hold your breath as well, and you will be in awe of what is going to happen. I am going to introduce what is apnea. Deep diving. People have used this. We can go back 4,000 years. There are some tribes and civilizations who lived close to the oceans and used apnea in order to go fishing and to take to get seafoods, find pearls for their trade. And it's only very recently that apnea became a way of exploring things. Before, we wanted to explore the human body, and in the 20th century we wanted to determine what were the limits, our limits. We went to the top of the Everest, we went to the space, and then Cousteau imagined how we could go into the depths. And I'm sure you've all seen the film Le Grand Bleu that was made 30 years ago, and its two heroes are Jacques Mayol and Enzo Mallorca. These two men brought the world record from 40 meters to more than 100 meters in under the sea. And they explored the human limits when we are confronted with our fears and the fears of scientists, of theoreticians, of doctors. They went in the field, as it were, and they had faith in their intuition, and they pushed the limits. So after the Grand Bleu, the film, many people said, well, this looks extraordinary, and we want to do deep diving. And it was organized as a sport, and as from the 90s, the first federation of deep diving, which was called AIDA. Well, deep diving is something that is practiced more and more throughout the world. There are competitions organized. There is not one week that goes by without a competition. There are so many clubs in France and elsewhere. Well, when you talk about competition, you have to talk about discipline. There are many ways of deep diving. First, there is a way of measuring time. You have static deep diving. It's the most primitive form, where you hold your breath and try to hold it for as long as possible. You can do that in a swimming pool. You just float and you try to extend these long minutes without breathing. And then you have the more dynamic one, where you stop breathing and you try to swim. And then you have deep diving, which is the one that's used in competition. You remember the film Le Grand Bleu, and you remember that these two heroes went down and then they came up with a balloon full of air, which is called No Limits. But I don't practice it because it's a very dangerous one. The major discipline is the one you see. This is constant weight. You go as far as possible down, and you simply come to the surface with a single fin. And you swim just like sea mammals, and you come back to the surface. All these records is what I've done. I won't go into details, and they were all in the same discipline. I started in 1996 deep diving by accident. I was doing this on the bus with a friend, on the school coach, and so it was a challenge amongst teenagers who I had such a big ego at the time, and we wanted to challenge one another, and it became a fascination for me. I only held my breath for 1.5 minutes, and my friends could hold his breath for more than 2 minutes. So I was very traumatized by that. I kept on doing this in bed because I was fascinated by the ability that my body had to hold its breath longer and longer. A few weeks after the 130 minutes, I was able to hold my breath for more than 4 minutes. I grew up in Nice, and I realized that it was be more interesting to do deep diving, to discover the seabed, rather than gaining one more second in my bed. So I discovered what was the very essence of deep diving, to go in the immensity of the ocean and to reconnect with this fundamental element. And water is a vector, is a carrier that can help you to reconnect with yourself. You are face to face with yourself. My body and mind find themselves helped by water, which brings together this in one single whole. And I realized that this was going to be very important for me. 5 years later, I was the first record man in 2002. I was just 20 years old. And then afterwards, I broke so many records in the same discipline. And I reached 126 meters in 2015 when I decided to stop looking for records. I was in a competition last week, but I will tell you about it in a little while. So just a little film on some of my performances to show you what deep diving is about. I'm on my back, taking my last intake of breath. I take 20 to 26 seconds to take 10 liters of air in my lungs. I'm completely relaxed, and then I decide to dive, and I start going down. I have this single fin. It's undulating movement, just like a sea mammal. From 0 to 26 meters, I have to make an effort. I have to swim because you have the push of Archimedes that keeps me afloat. So since I'm floating, in order to go deeper, I have to swim, and I have to find the right compromise between effectiveness and power and save my energy. And then the pressure crushes my body, and the volume of air in my lungs becomes smaller, and I become so heavy that at 30 meters I can carry on going down without swimming. So this is free fall or free diving, which is wonderful. I'll come back to it. It's an intoxicating movement because you feel that you are completely drawn into the depths. And this drop is going to last about 1.50 minutes. So it's 3.20 minutes all in all. So 2 minutes of images is not even in real time because it lasts much longer. So I'm going to drop for 100 meters without making any effort. I feel completely free. It's really intoxicating. And then when I get there, I can't hang around, as it were, because I have to show the judge at the service that I've reached that depth. So I have to take a little plate and take it back up to show that I have gone to that depth. Going back up is quite complicated because, as I said, I was attracted by the depth, but going up, you have to make an effort. And now I need to start breathing, and I will explain this later. So many things are going on in my mind. I have to remain concentrated, and I have to swim as effectively as possible, all while staying calm. And that will bring me to 20 meters to the surface, and there I have my safety, my divers who will accompany me to the surface.
Vous avez vu cet anglais impeccable en sortant de l'eau.
So you see how impeccable all this was when I come out of the water. I can't even rest. I have to show the judge that I am completely myself. If I lose, if I faint, then the dive is not validated. So because the athlete has to prove that he is all there. And you have to fulfill a protocol. That's why we have the judges. This protocol is very simple. You have 15 seconds once you come to the surface. You cannot put your head back into the water, even to look at something. You're disqualified. So you have to stay at the surface, and you have to remove what you have on you. And for me, it's what I have on my nose clip. And then I have to say, I'm okay. You have to do it in that order. If I come out and I say I'm okay and I make the sign I'm okay, I'm disqualified. So I have to have full body integrity when I come out of the water. Now, let's come back on what happens during this dive. I'm going to try to describe it to you step by step. It's an inner trip. And it's an exploration that took some time to understand fully. It took me 20 years. It's an exploration of the body and the mind. And I'm going to try and share this with you step by step. So deep diving starts when I leave the surface. The moment my face is in contact with water, that's when it starts. And there is a first thing that happens. It's a natural phenomenon. It's what we call the diving reflex. And in English, you say mammalian diving reflex. Now, what is that? The moment I stop breathing and my face comes into contact with water, there are sensors on my face that will be sensitive to the change in temperature and will alert my brain, there is a problem. Something is happening. You're supposed to breathe, but now I'm no longer breathing. So there is a change in temperature at the surface of my face. So I'm in danger. So I need to be protected. So what is the first vital protection that the brain will order to the rest of the body, and that is oxygen. If the person stops breathing, it means that person is no longer going to have sufficient amount of oxygen. So the body needs to save the oxygen that's in the body. So the heart rate will slow down. That's the first impact. The second impact, you're going to peripheral vasoconstriction. That means your extremities are going, your limbs, the water in your limbs will go to the noble organs, to the most important organs of the body. So towards the lungs, the brain, and the heart. This is a reflex. I have no control of that. Some of you have never gone underwater, but if one day you do, this reflex will immediately happen. The more you train, the more the reflex will be powerful and effective. What is fascinating is that this reflex, we share it with other marine mammals, and scientists are trying to understand how we were able to hold apnea for so long. Here you have a number of whales. This is the very first time I'm showing. This is a film that we are preparing and that will be distributed next year. And I met with the whales. They are the mammals which are the most effective. These are sperm whales. They can go down to the 2,000 meters in order to get giant squids, eat giant squids. So we meet with our masters, the sperm whales. And they, like us, we have the same capacity of adaptation, but their capacity has evolved over a million of years. But we all have a small dolphin or a sperm whale that wakes up whenever we put our head under the water. And in nature, as soon as you put your head underwater, you're going to get a push from your body that will help you to withstand that. This is why we're able to do deep sea diving. Now, I've sort of moved very quickly. Can we go back a little? Yes, we had relaxation. Why relaxation? Because what happens in my mind, I'm not doing much, really, in my body. It's the reflex that will take over. But psychologically, I only have one thing in my mind. I want to be able to imitate these marine mammals. And I want to be as beautiful and as effective as they are in movement, simply because the apnea is going to be very long, and also be able to save energy. So I don't want to be fast or strong, but all I want to do is to be completely mentally relaxed, and this relaxation will bring about physical relaxation as well, and this will help me to carry on. So I'll explain now. I can keep going down, and I don't need to swim anymore because the pressure will crush my body more and more. At the surface, so there's 1 bar atmosphere pressure. That's the one that we normally feel here. But when I go down to 10 meters, the pressure is going to double, and the volume of air in my lungs is going to halve. So it will be compressed. Instead, from 10 liters, it will go to 5 liters. And this will increase. This will not increase after 30 meters. At 30 meters, I have 2 liters air, and then I can start dropping. This pressure, you should be in a position to accept it. You have to be able to accept it, because it's really something that's happening outside. You feel the water around you crushing you. The more you go down, the greater the pressure. So we do a lot of exercise at the surface to exercise the elasticity of the thorax. You need to be extremely supple. This is why we do a lot of yoga, a lot of exercises on the thorax and the diaphragm, so that our thorax becomes like a chewing gum. It should be like a plastic bottle and not a glass bottle, because if it were like a glass bottle, it would just explode. We should be able to distort our body. So we do exercises which are associated to a type of meditation, which is inspired by pranayama. And we're going to work on our diaphragm, the mobility of our diaphragm, the mobility of the thorax. We're going to empty our lungs completely, and at the surface, I will pretend that I don't even have 1 centiliter of air. So in fact, to simulate what happens in the depths. And I'm going to adjust my thorax so that it can accept this pressure. Psychologically, what is extremely important, and one has to bear in mind, is that at that moment, the reflex is to protect oneself. When you are confronted with opposition, when you have an external constraint, as an earthling, you want to protect yourself. If I start pushing you around here, you're not going to accept it. You're going to resist with your muscles so as not to fall. So when you start, that is the first reflex. The pressure is crushing me. I will resist it. But if you do that, I was talking about suppleness, then you're not supple. You become extremely rigid, and you can really get hurt yourself very, very badly. So psychologically, you should be in a position to accept, and you should be able to let go completely. The immensity of the ocean is there. It is crushing me, and I can't do anything. So I have to accept it. First mentally, and this mental acceptance will in fact make it that my muscles and my tissues will also relax. And if I'm completely relaxed, there will be no pain, no suffering. The pressure crushes my body, but it's an envelope. It's like a pillow on me. And one must realize that in our daily life, we fight, we try to resist external constraints. I'm not saying that one shouldn't continue fighting because one can change things. But what I draw from my experience is that there are situations where we have no control. And the best thing to do is to accept and to let go and not try to waste energy, because we will be at any rate powerless, and just keep the energy to change what I can change. So I can change the position of my body to be more aerodynamic. I can do that. But the pressure, I will never do anything against it. The only thing I can do is to accept it. And then I go down in the depths, and then there is another constraint. You may say yourself, I'm going in a very hostile world. Indeed, I am going into a hostile world, and you're going to reach a temperature barrier where the temperature will go down suddenly. I experienced it yesterday. It happened at about 25 meters. From 0 to 25, the water is at 22 centigrade. It's not summer yet, but after 25 meters, it goes down to 13 degrees Celsius. And it's a very violent impact. It's a shock to the body. And this year, I've tried to work on this cold, on this feeling of cold, and I've tried to determine what is the impact of that, and how could I manage mentally and physically my exposure to this cold element. So I tried to do this simply in a swimsuit. I dived in April in a swimsuit. So I mentally and physically prepared myself. I went to Finland, where I dived under the ice. The water was at 2 Celsius with a very thin suit. And then I went in a swimsuit. And it was very interesting to see what was the mental and physical experience when you expose yourself violently to an extreme environment. To be confronted with cold allows you to put yourself in a situation of survival. It's great discomfort, and I realized that all these experiences, when you feel such great discomfort, requires a work of introspection, and there needs to be an absolute connection between the body and the mind. I made many experiences of deprivation of air, for example, deprivation of food, that's another vital function, and then deprivation of heat by exposing myself to extreme temperatures. And I realized that every time that this brings me back to a situation where the survival mode is triggered off. When you fast, for example, there are changes that happen in your metabolism, and the same is true for the cold. There is the survival mode that is triggered off, and you can find energy in yourself that you never thought were there. I never thought that I could be in water at 2 Celsius in a swimsuit and for 3 or 4 minutes and to feel good. And I wanted to do the impossible, go down 100 meters in a swimsuit. People said to me, it's impossible because you have to manage apnea, you have to manage the pressure, but then you have to add the acceptance of the cold, which is going to be a shock to the body, and you need to be relaxed in spite of that. So it's a little door that I've opened, and I want to open it wide later on. So there is the cold light is going to disappear, and the only thing that I need to concentrate on is not fight back against the cold, against the pressure, and so that I will be completely accepted by the depths. And then I fall, and I reach 100 meters. 50 years ago, doctors were saying, scientists were saying, they told Jacques Mayol, you're going to die if you're going down 100 meters because the body won't resist. It will simply implode. And I go past the 100 meters, just like Jacques Mayol did it at the time, and I feel good. And then I reach 126 meters. When you think of it, you put it on paper when you're sitting on your sofa. Well, it's a very hostile environment indeed. It's cold, no light. Surface is very far away. I'm very far from that surface. Even if I want to go back, I can't go back quickly. The pressure is enormous. However, I don't feel like I want to breathe because I'm in a mental situation where I can accept. I'm in complete harmony with my body, which is relaxed, and with my mind. There's a letting go, and I can accept water around me. So I have practically dissolved in that element, and I don't want to breathe. I feel good, and there is a feeling that actually is all pervasive, and it's a deep feeling of humility. This hostility makes me realize that I'm nothing. I'm just one little drop of water in the ocean, and if I try to find my bearings, I can't find anything. I look up, there's black. Bottom, it's dark blue, and if I look around me, I only see dark blue. So there is blue all over the place. And on Earth, there is no other place where you can experience that. Even if you go at the top of the Everest, you're at the summit, but your feet are on the ground. But here, there are no bearings possible. So I can feel the infinite. So my senses feel the infinity. Well, there is no infinity because there's seabed and there are limits, but with my eyes I can only see dark blue. And this is, aside from the hostility of the environment, it makes me feel humble. I'm not breaking a record, I'm not becoming a world record holder. I'm just a mammal, earth mammal, who's pretending to be a marine mammal, and then I have to get this plate and go back up. But there's no pride in that. I'm just happy to be able to witness all this, and then I start going back up, and then your mind changes, because as I was going down, I was in total harmony. I relaxed. I completely let go. But if I want to go back, I need to swim. So I have to give an effort, which is enormous, in order to go back up. And I'm going to feel all kinds of things. And that's when things are going to get complicated. You have what we call decompression sickness. This is a teaser of a film. Julie Gauthier has come with me, and she has filmed the decompression sickness. All I can see, all the hallucinations, all I can feel in the depths. It would be interesting to share that with the public through a film, because very few people know what we experience profoundly. So this sickness is difficult to explain. It's linked to pressure, to gas exhaustion, to nitrogen, CO2, oxygen, which through great pressure are going to radically change how the mind thinks. This film is about 12 minutes long. I invite you to have a look at it. It's an immersion, total immersion in my universe and what goes on in my mind when I deep dive. So this decompression sickness can be pleasant, but it can be also very disruptive. And there are visions and experiences that create a great deal of anxiety, and I have no control over that. So when this happens, I don't know what's going to happen to me. It could be very pleasant, but it could be something very difficult to manage. It took me some time to manage it because I became too much involved in this sickness, and I wanted to transform it so that it would be to my advantage, and it would just get worse. So I realized that I had to extract myself from that and to look at it as a film. Like, you know, when I go back home and put on the TV, I don't have a real TV, but virtual TV, and you know, there's something on TV and I just have to watch what's happening. So that is the experience of decompression sickness. And then my body is going to physiologically awaken. There's lactic acid in my legs. That is the waste that appears in your body when you produce energy and you consume oxygen. Lactic acid, when you are out at the surface, you're going to get rid of it because you breathe. But the more I'm going to swim, the more my legs will hurt, and I won't be able to do it. So I will have to swim with my arms alone. So you have decompression sickness. My legs are going to become very, very heavy. And then I will start feeling that I want to breathe. And that happens when you reach 60 meters from the surface. So I'm really far from the surface. It doesn't mean that I don't have any more oxygen. It means that my CO2 level is going to reach a certain threshold. And the CO2 threshold, which is individual, specific to each one of us, will give an information to the brain and say, it's about time you start breathing. But when I'm at 70 meters, I cannot breathe. So the great temptation would be to look up and say, where am I? Is the surface close? But if I lift my head, what happens? I won't see the surface. And then are my safety divers there? No, they're too far away. And if I suddenly feel like doing that, I'm going to start panicking because I will have expectations, and those expectations will not be fulfilled. And that's what happens to newcomers. When they do it for the first time, they want to go up quickly, but that makes you use up too much oxygen, and it creates a great deal of stress. So the only way to get to the surface is not to desire it or want it, but just remain in the present moment. I'm here, and I must concentrate on what I need to do. That is to swim some more, and third, and I have to look straight ahead of me. I look at the cable, which is in front of my eyes. I don't look down. I don't look up. I'm here, and now. And that's the only way. When I feel I want to breathe, when my legs are hurting, when I have hallucinations, that's the only way to get to the surface with some serenity. And every time I'm surprised, I say, wow, there they are, my safety divers. They're about at 25 meters from the surface. That's a danger zone because I'm reaching the end of the apnea. I've used up a lot of oxygen, and then you can have this, you may faint there, but you know you're not alone anymore. You know that you have a sufficient amount of margin, but one has to be very careful in this zone. And this is why I'm no longer alone. But I'm never really alone, because when I drop, I go along a cable and I'm hooked up to the cable. If I have a problem, and this has never happened to anybody in the history of deep diving, people can hoist the cable for you. But the most important part is the last 20 meters. And every time I talk about deep diving, the most important thing that one must know about this sport. No, it's not extreme sport or for mad people. It's less dangerous than going up the mountains, but there is one rule that one must comply with. Never dive alone. If there is someone who says, okay, I'm going to go to a swimming pool, I'm going to try and do this. Don't do that. Don't do that, absolutely, because it means you're not listening to your body and you go beyond your limits. And if you faint, then there's nobody there to help you. So it's very important not to do this alone and to belong to a club. So these are the last few meters. My safety divers are with me. I am serene because I know I'm very close to the surface, and I'm going to concentrate on my first breath. And this first breath, I'm waiting for it. When it comes, you breathe in very strongly, and it's like the first breath a child takes when it comes out of the womb. And it's your prize, but it's also a little painful because it's also a shock. You spent 3.30 minutes in another world where all your senses have been pushed around. Water is different from the air, and then the sound is different completely. You hear the voices, people around you, and it's very brutal. And then the light, which was dark, everything was dark. You have sunlight, people, noise, air on your face, then you have taste, smell. So in a fraction of a second, your senses are assailed. And you're very happy because when you do diving, it's simply to come back to the surface, breathe, and start again. And to find another way of living your daily life. The reason why I dive is simply to have this profound connection between my body, my mind, the element which is water, and every time I come out of the water, I feel I'm a new person and a little different. Perhaps this will tempt you. Maybe you will try it out yourselves. Thank you.
Merci. Merci.